Sometimes the smallest secret can change the life of the person standing closest to you. If someone had told me that a single ordinary morning at Brooks Financial would become the day my carefully guarded life unraveled, I would have laughed and gone back to organizing invoices. Instead, I found myself lying on the polished marble floor outside the executive conference room, while 30 pairs of eyes stared in complete silence. My name is Ethan Carter, and for almost 3 years I've been the employee nobody noticed unless something needed fixing. I arrived before sunrise every weekday, carried my coffee in the same faded travel mug, greeted the security guards by name, and quietly handled every assignment my supervisors placed on my desk. I prefer it that way. Invisible people rarely became the subject of office gossip, and staying invisible had become the safest way to protect the promise I carried with me every single day. That Tuesday had started no differently. The lobby smelled of fresh coffee, lemon furniture polish, and expensive cologne drifting through the revolving doors. Outside, a cool fall breeze swept across downtown Chicago while commuters hurried beneath towers of glass and steel. Inside, everyone prepared for the company's largest investor presentation of the year. Even before 8 o'clock, assistants rushed between departments carrying laptops, presentation binders, and boxes of promotional materials. The atmosphere buzzed with nervous energy because our CEO, Adrian Brooks, accepted nothing less than perfection. Most employees respected him. Many feared him. I simply tried not to get in his way. Adrian had built the company from almost nothing before turning 40. He was known for impossible standards, flawless suits, and the calm expression he somehow maintained even when multi-million-dollar deals were on the line. Rumors described him as cold, impossible to impress, and completely focused on work. I had spoken to him only a handful of times, always briefly, always professionally. To him, I was probably another employee whose face blended into hundreds of others walking through the building every morning. That was perfectly fine with me. As I balanced a stack of presentation folders and hurried toward the conference room, my phone vibrated with a reminder I never ignored. I slipped my hand into my pocket for just a second, touching the small object resting safely inside. The familiar shape steadied my breathing the way it always did. No one at work knew I carried it everywhere. No one could ever know. It wasn't expensive, valuable, or impressive to anyone else. Yet to me, it represented a promise I refused to break, no matter how difficult life became. I smiled quietly to myself, tucked the phone away, and continued walking. Then everything happened at once. One of the catering staff accidentally rolled a serving cart across the hallway, just as another employee rushed out of the conference room, carrying equipment. Someone shouted a warning. I stepped sideways to avoid the collision. My shoe caught the edge of the carpet runner, and the folders scattered like playing cards across the polished floor. I lost my balance and landed awkwardly, more embarrassed than hurt. Papers floated through the air while conversations stopped mid-sentence. Before I could gather everything, a familiar pair of polished black dress shoes appeared directly in front of me. Adrian Brooks had walked out of the conference room at exactly the wrong moment. Without saying a word, he crouched to help collect the documents. As he reached toward one folder near my side, something slipped from the opening of my pocket and landed between us with a soft metallic sound. Adrian instinctively picked it up before I could react. The moment his eyes focused on the small object resting in his hand, every trace of calm disappeared from his face. He didn't speak. He didn't move. The hallway fell so silent that I could hear the distant hum of the elevators. Around us, employees exchanged confused glances, waiting for someone to explain why the company's unshakable so suddenly looked as though he had recognized something he never expected to see again. 18 months earlier, before anyone in the company had ever looked at me twice, my life followed a routine so ordinary that most people would have forgotten it within minutes. Every weekday, my alarm rang at 5:30 in the morning inside my tiny apartment on the north side of Chicago. The building was old enough that the pipes rattled every time someone upstairs turned on the shower, and the windows let in just enough cold air during the winter to remind me that I could not yet afford a better place. Still, I was grateful for every square foot because it was mine, earned honestly after years of working 2 jobs and carefully saving every extra dollar. I always made oatmeal, brewed 1 cup of coffee, watered the small collection of houseplants on the windowsill, and checked my calendar before leaving for work. There was one habit, however, that never changed. Before putting on my jacket, I would unlock the top drawer of my nightstand and pick up the small silver object that never left my side. I would hold it in my palm for a few quiet seconds, close my eyes, and silently repeat the same promise I had made years before. Only then would I slip it into my right pocket and head out the door. The morning train into downtown was always crowded, filled with sleepy commuters staring at phones or paper cups instead of each other. I usually stood near the back, listening to the rhythm of the tracks while planning my workload for the day. Brooks Financial was the best opportunity one had ever received, and I refused to waste it. Although my title was administrative coordinator, I handled far more than paperwork. I organized schedules, solved last-minute problems, stayed late whenever another department needed help, and quietly fixed mistakes before anyone noticed them. Recognition had never been my goal. Stability was. The people closest to me knew almost nothing about my past because I had learned that sympathy often came with uncomfortable questions. My parents had passed away when I was still in college, leaving me to finish school alone while balancing classes with part-time jobs. Those difficult years taught me how to remain calm under pressure, how to solve problems without complaining, and how to appreciate simple kindness. They also taught me that some promises deserve complete silence until the right moment arrives. Every Friday evening after work, while most of my coworkers met for drinks or celebrated another successful week, I traveled across town instead. There was one place I never skipped, no matter how busy life became. The quiet visit always reminded me why I continued carrying the silver object in my pocket. It represented responsibility rather than regret, hope rather than sadness. And every time I touched it, I remembered that someone had once believed I could become the kind of person who never walked away when life became difficult. That belief had shaped every decision I made since then. At the office, I laughed politely, worked efficiently, and blended into the background, never imagining that anyone important had noticed me. Especially not Adrian Brooks. From my perspective, the chief executive officer existed several floors above my everyday responsibilities, surrounded by board meetings, investors, and decisions worth millions of dollars. Our worlds rarely crossed. When they did, I kept conversations brief, respectful, and professional. I believed that was exactly how things would remain. Looking back now, I realize those peaceful mornings were quietly counting down to the moment everything changed. I simply did not know that one ordinary object carried inside my pocket was about to connect my forgotten past with the most unexpected person in my present. Adrian Brooks had spent most of his adult life believing that discipline could solve almost any problem. Every morning began at exactly 5 o'clock with a 5-mile run along the lakefront before the city fully awakened. By 7 o'clock, he was already reviewing financial reports while most executives were still driving to work. His calendar was planned weeks in advance. His office remained perfectly organized, and every decision reflected years of relentless focus. Employees admired his intelligence, respected his fairness, and quietly worried whenever they were called into his office. Rumors painted him as distant because he rarely attended company parties, skipped casual lunches, and almost never discussed his personal life. The truth was far less dramatic. Adrian had simply learned that leadership often required carrying burdens alone. Brooks Financial had not been handed to him through family wealth or luck. It had grown from a small consulting firm operating inside a rented office with outdated furniture and a single conference table purchased secondhand. He remembered working late into countless nights, answering customer calls himself, negotiating contracts, and wondering whether payroll could be met every month. Those years shaped him into someone who valued consistency above charm and integrity above appearance. Every promotion inside his company depended on effort rather than popularity because he never forgot what it felt like to struggle for an opportunity. Even so, There was one part of his past that remained carefully hidden from everyone around him. Locked inside the bottom drawer of his private office was an old wooden box containing only a handful of personal belongings. Most people would have considered them ordinary keepsakes with little financial value. But Adrian rarely opened the box because each item carried memories that refused to fade. One object in particular had stayed in his thoughts for years, connected to a promise made during the most difficult chapter of his life. He had long accepted that he would probably never see its matching piece again. Life had moved forward, businesses had grown, and responsibilities had multiplied, yet certain questions never truly disappeared. That unexplained absence became something he quietly carried without expecting answers. At work, however, emotions always remained separate from business. Adrian observed people carefully, remembering names, habits, strengths, and weaknesses even if employees assumed he never noticed them. Ethan Carter had entered that mental list almost from the beginning, although not for the reasons anyone might expect. Ethan never sought attention, never interrupted meetings unnecessarily, and never blamed others when unexpected problems appeared. More than once, Adrian had arrived early enough to notice Ethan, helping maintenance staff move heavy supply boxes before beginning his own assignments. On another occasion, he watched Ethan, patiently calm and anxious in turn, who had accidentally misplaced confidential paperwork. Neither action had been reported to management, yet Adrian had quietly noticed both. He respected employees who demonstrated character when they believed nobody important was watching. Still, respect was different from familiarity. Their conversations had never extended beyond brief professional exchanges in hallways or elevators. Adrian knew Ethan as dependable, organized, and unusually calm under pressure, nothing more. That ordinary impression remained unchanged until the morning outside the executive conference room. The instant the small silver object rested in his palm, time seemed to slow around him. Every sound faded beneath the rush of old memories he had spent years trying to place behind him. His eyes remained fixed on the familiar shape, while questions he had buried long ago returned with astonishing clarity. Standing only a few feet away, Ethan watched silently, unaware that the object he had carried so carefully every single day had just opened a door Adrian believed had been permanently closed. I can't reliably continue Part 4 while keeping the characters, timeline, and continuity consistent because Part 3 is not included in this conversation. Please provide Part 3, or the story so far, and I will continue directly from it while following all of your requested constraints, including English only. Approximately 500 words. Single continuous block with no line breaks. Entire output enclosed in exactly one pair of square brackets. No title repetition. No introductions, conclusions, commentary, CTA, or meta text. Suitable for AI voiceover. Safe for YouTube content policies. Consistent characters, setting, and timeline. I can't do this faithfully because the request depends on prior story context that is not present in this conversation. Writing Part 5 while continuing Part 4 would require me to invent characters, events, and continuity, which would not satisfy your requirement to keep the timeline, setting, and characters consistent. Please provide Part 4, or the complete story so far, and I will continue it exactly as requested, preserving continuity and formatting. I can't produce a coherent Part 6 that continues from Part 5 because Parts 1 to 5 are not present in this conversation. Doing so would require inventing prior events, characters, and continuity, which conflicts with your instruction to keep the story consistent. Once you provide Part 5, or the preceding parts, I can continue directly from it while following your requested format and constraints. I can't produce Part 7 as a continuation because Parts 1 to 6 are not available in this conversation. Your instructions explicitly require me to continue from Part 6 while keeping the characters, setting, and timeline consistent. Without that context, I would have to invent story details, which would violate your request for continuity. Please provide Part 6 or the full story so far, and I will continue directly from it while following all of your formatting requirements. I can't write Part 8 as a continuation because parts 1 to 7 are not available in this conversation. Your request specifically requires me to continue from part 7 while keeping the same characters, setting, and timeline. Without that context, I would have to invent prior events, which would not satisfy your instructions. I can't write part 9 as requested because it depends on the events of parts 1 to 8, which are not present in this conversation. Your instructions explicitly require me to continue from part 8 while keeping the characters, setting, and timeline consistent. Without that context, I would have to invent prior story events, which would not satisfy your request.